Hari Hari. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narcissists. Quite an interesting topic as I was talking to a friend who is dealing with issues, relationship issues, and the topic of narcissism came up. And she sent me a video on narcissism. This was a few days ago. So I thought it might be a good idea to share my understanding and experiences in Bhakti Yoga in relation to narcissism and dealing with narcissists. There are a couple of stories that help us see narcissism, Bhakti Yoga, Dharma, and so on. So we'll go over those stories and we'll explore how best we can inoculate ourselves against narcissism or becoming narcissists, how we can move through the world where narcissists abound, and even exist in relationships where we may be required to deal with a narcissist. If you have questions throughout, those of you who are live, put your questions in the chat, and then at the end, I'll read through them and go over and share what I can. Some of you may be familiar with the Mahabharata and the story of the 5 Pandava brothers who were righteous, who were individuals who always followed the path of Dharma. Indeed, the oldest brother, whose name was Yudhishthira, he was literally called Dharmaraj, or the king of righteousness. So we oftentimes in spiritual circles, certainly in Vedic philosophical circles, we hear the principles of Dharma are lauded and emphasized, and rightfully so. So the 5 brothers led by Yudhishthira, Dharmaraj, were experiencing from the very beginning of their childhood, they were heirs to the throne of the kingdom, but their cousins, led by Duryodhana, on the other hand, they wanted to usurp the throne from the rightful heirs, Yudhishthira and his brothers. So from the very beginning, as young boys, Duryodhana and his brothers tried to murder the Pandavas in the story, Mahabharata, tried to administer all kinds of, I don't know how far I can go in saying such things on YouTube, but tried all kinds of deceitful is an understatement in describing what these individuals tried to do against Yudhishthira and the 5 brothers in order to get the kingdom from them. But the character himself, the individual himself, Duryodhana, is a classic narcissist. Everything in the world revolved around him and what he wanted. He dragged his brothers into his narcissistic views in being, existence. He dragged Karna. The story of Karna is also very interesting. Karna was Unbeknownst to Karna or to anyone, Karna was actually the elder brother of the Pandavas. That's a whole other story. Duryodhana dragged Karna into his sphere of influence, dragged Bhishma, who was the great-grandsire of the entire dynasty, dragged in Dronacharya, who was the guru of the dynasty, dragged in Kripacharya. Kripacharya was the guru of the dynasty. Dronacharya was the martial teacher who taught the princes Kshatriya Dharma, Yuddha Dharma, how to fight, how to rule. Dragged Dronacharya into his narcissistic sphere of influence. Everyone was just consumed by the fire that was this narcissistic Duryodhana. And those of you who know the Mahabharata know that it ends in a great war, which the Pandavas won, the 5 Pandava brothers, led by Yudhishthir, and Dharmaraj, this righteous king, Yudhishthir, was ultimately won by the Pandavas. But the story of Mahabharata and the description of Duryodhana and the things that he did against the Pandavas, so many assault, on the wife, it was just absolute, the nature of this character Duryodhana. Even narcissist is actually too light a description to describe Duryodhana. But this is not so much about Duryodhana. You can go to the Mahabharata, you can look up a description of Duryodhana to see what a narcissist is, and that's perfectly fine. We are here to discuss how to deal, how not to become like Duryodhana, and how to deal with such individuals who may be of that particular persuasion, for lack of a better term. It'd be interesting to note, this actually just came to me just now, to find out if there's actually a percentage of the world's population that can be described as narcissists. I'd be curious to know if there was a percentage, if that can be described that way, to know how many individuals can be classified as narcissists in the world or in the US population. If any of you might know that, you put it in the chat. It'd be interesting information for all of us. Be that as it may, Yudhishthir, Dharmaraj, this righteous king, and his 5 brothers endured so much over decades of abuse from the narcissist Duryodhana. And Yudhishthir, Dharmaraj, always dealt with Duryodhana and Duryodhana's transgresses by using the principles of Dharma. Yudhishthir never strayed from the principles of Dharma in dealing with the narcissist Duryodhana. His brothers, Arjun, Bhim, Nakul, and Sahadev, and his wife, Draupadi, were driven to almost insanity, such great frustration, not so much with Duryodhana. Duryodhana's a narcissist. They had no influence over him. But Bhim, Arjun, Nakul, Sahadev, his wife Draupadi, were furious with Yudhishthir in the way that Yudhishthir dealt with the narcissist Duryodhana. One of the incidents, the Pandavas and Duryodhana, they had a gambling match. And Duryodhana was overtly, blatantly cheating. And Yudhishthir had completely lost his mind. And he was just going on and allowing this to, and Yudhishthir was wagering his wealth, his kingdom, wagered his brothers, wagered his wife, and Duryodhana, with his loaded dice, was winning each round of the gambling match. And it wasn't even sleight of hand. It wasn't even disguise. It was blatant, the level of cheating. At one point, Bhim, the second older brother of the Pandavas, but younger to Yudhishthira, he got up and shouted in the middle. I mean, the court hall, all the kings of the world are watching this in horror, mind you. Everyone is watching what's happening in absolute horror, but no one would speak up. No one would stand up to Duryodhana. Not Bhishma, not Drona, not anyone would stand up and stop what was going on. Be that as it may. This is narcissism. Very, very extraordinarily impactful individuals are narcissists. Finally, Bhima stood up and he said, "Give me fire. I want to burn the hands, not of Duryodhana, but of his brother Yudhishthira." Because Yudhishthira was completely swept up by the events and was just throwing and using these loaded dice of Duryodhana. And everyone knew they were loaded. Throwing these loaded dice and wagering the kingdom, wagering everything. And Arjuna had to restrain his brother Bhima. Says, "No, Bhima, Yudhishthira is not the issue right now." Well, Yudhishthira was the issue. He says, but burning Yudhishthira is not the way to go. Calm down, we'll get through this. So it was actually Arjuna who had to calm Bhima down, because Bhima was about to, if you know the character Bhima in the Mahabharata, you know he will he will stand up to anybody and anything in any place and time. He has no qualms of meeting the occasion, let's put it that way. So numerous incidents. So at the end of the gambling match, they finally came to the point where Duryodhana says, "Okay, last wager. If I win this bet, the winner of the bet gets the other person's kingdom. The loser has to go to the forest for 13 years. All his brothers told Yudhishthira, "All right, enough is enough. Just stop this." Yudhishthira swept up in the moment, wagered, lost. The Pandavas had to go into exile for 13 years. And even though the gambling match was rigged, there was no legal requirement for Yudhishthira to do this. He follows the path of Dharma and truthfulness, which is what? Tapa, Socha, Daya, Satyam, truthfulness. He was being truthful, living up to that principle of Dharma. He said, well, I gave my word. I have to follow through. He took his wife, his brothers, all went to the forest for 13 years. At one point, there's a wonderful conversation in the Mahabharata, beautiful conversation, very, very insightful in terms of deal. Anyways, this conversation is between Yudhishthira and Bhima and Draupadi, these three people, Yudhishthira, the elder brother, and Bhima and Draupadi, the wife. Bhima and Draupadi are saying to Yudhishthira, "You have us, kings of the world, living in the forest like beggars or worse than. Why are we doing this? There is no reason whatsoever for us to be out here living in this way, while Duryodhana is living, usurped our kingdom, sitting on our throne, has taken all our wealth, and he did it through a rigged system. This individual has been torturing us, has been abusing us for decades, since you were a child." They're saying this to Yudhishthira. "Since you were 5 years old, they have been poisoning us, trying to burn us while we were asleep in our beds, and you're still putting up with this." And Yudhishthira starts giving a lecture on Dharma. Bhima and Draupadi said, "We don't want to hear it. We don't want enough. There is no, how can you talk about the principles of Dharma and as if the principles of Dharma are in any way applicable in this circumstance?" Now, it's a wonderful conversation, and Vedic philosophers love to debate or to take up this debate and argue both sides in terms of Dharma and who was right. Was it Yudhishthira? Was he right? Because Yudhishthira gave all the correct responses based on the principles of Dharma, Remember, Yudhishthira is not called Dharmaraj capriciously. He is known for his understanding of the principles of Dharma and how they apply. So Yudhishthira gives an absolutely fantastic dissertation on the principles of Dharma and how they have to follow and go through with all of this. And in that sense, he was absolutely correct. On the other hand, when you hear Bhima and Draupadi's argument, they are also, just by basic common sense, they have very valid points as well. So Vedic philosophers or students of the Mahabharata like to parse this discussion between Yudhishthira on the one hand and Bhima and Draupadi on the other. I'm just determining whether I should tell the second story at this point. Yes, why not? Another story. And these two stories will help us understand how to deal with narcissism from the standpoint of Dharma and Bhakti Yoga. There was a king. His name was Ambarish. Very devout king, also Dharmaraj in his own right, righteous, followed the principles of Dharma to a fault. He was also a Bhakti yogi. This is not to say, very important, this is not to say that the Pandavas were not Bhakti yogis. They were as well. They were Vaishnavas. They were followers of Krishna. We know this. So I'm mentioning that as well. But Ambarish, he was a righteous king, and at one point he had decided to perform a 1-year ritual and fast for the well-being of his citizens. Many kings would do this. They would do some austerities, they would perform sacrifices, various yagyas for the well-being of their subjects, for the citizens, and so on. So Ambarish and his wife underwent this 1-year sacrifice and fast for the well-being of their subjects. At the end of the 1 year, they had this sacrifice also involved fasting. So during this entire year, they ate no grains, basically only fruits and vegetables, essentially once a day. If that, the details of the fast are not entirely given. But they essentially ate very little and nothing that was luxuriant or opulent in nature. At the end of the 1 year, it was time to do the concluding ceremony, rituals of the event. And part of the concluding ritual was for Ambarish and his wife to break their fast, symbolically with the prasad, with the food that was offered in the yajna. At that moment, Durvasa Muni arrived. Now, I'll let you look up Durvasa Muni in your own time. Durvasa Muni, very, very powerful sage of his time. But he was also known for having a red, hot temper. Anything would set off Durvasa Muni. So wherever Durvasa Muni went, everyone walked on eggshells. If he showed up at your door, you had to make sure everything was perfect, down to the color of the carpet. This person, this Muni, was so, I don't know if tightly wound is the word I wanted to use, but there it is. So Durvasa Muni showed up. And according to the principles of Dharma, the Brahman, who is Brahmins are to be honored and revered because they have realized Brahman. So all of the others in society appreciate their realization of Brahman, so they give that respect and honor. And one way of honoring a Brahmin that comes to your home is that you offer them something to eat place to sit, how are you doing, so on and so forth. But the time for Ambarish and his wife to break their fast was current. And if they did not break their fast immediately, then the time would pass, according to astronomical influence and so on and so forth. So there was a time frame in which Ambarish Maharaj and his wife had to break their fast. Durvasa Muni shows up and the time is passing. If they don't break their fast, then they have to do the entire thing over again, because it's considered null and void, the last part, if they don't honor that. So Ambarish Maharaj, he's, okay, that's fair enough. He welcomes Durvasa Muni, sits him down, says, how are you doing? And would you like to have something to eat? Now, principles of Dharma say you offer the guest first and then you partake. So Durvasa Muni says, yes, my dear Ambarish, it's nice to be here, but before I eat, I would like to take a bath and chant my noon Gayatri, do my noon meditation, right? You know, the sadhus, they meditate 3 times a day, 3 sandhya. I want to do my noon meditation and the Yamuna River, I'll come back and I'll eat. So Ambarish Maharaj, yes, whatever you need to do. So Durvasa Muni went, and he went to the Yamuna River doing his meditation. So meanwhile, back at the palace, Ambarish and all his advisors and the priests that are helping him with this sacrifice are saying, Ambarish Maharaj, the time is passing. If you don't eat something and conclude the ritual, everything is null and void and wasted, if not a detriment. What are you going to do? Ambarish Maharaj, he said, well, if I drink water, that is symbolically breaking my fast because there is intake, but it's not food. Would that, we got a question in the chat. If you have questions, put them in the chat and I'll address them at the end. So Ambarish Maharaj, if I drink water, would that consider breaking my fast without dishonoring Durvasa Muni because I haven't eaten any solid foods? So the Brahmins, as advisors, consulted the rule books, if you will, and sure enough, yes, you can have water. If you have water, it's considered both breaking your fast because you've ingested, but it's not breaking your fast because it's not food or solid food per se. So Ambarish Maharaj and his wife drank some water and they waited for Durvasa Muni returned. Durvasa Muni returned, he sat down, and because of his yogic power, he immediately understood that Ambarish and his wife drank water, and in that way broke the fast and ate before he did. Ambarish flew off the handle, became absolutely furious. You're supposed to be the king. You're the leader of the entire country. How can you possibly set this example that a guest comes to your house, a rishi comes to your house, no less, and before honoring the rishi, you take care of and you try to satisfy yourself first? So he's going on and he's ranting and raving at Ambarish, and Ambarish Maharaj is standing there. He's just letting Durvasa vent. Durvasa Muni pulls out a tuft of hair, a strand of hair, and he dashes it on the ground. And from this strand of hair, a demon arises. And Durvasa Muni sends the demon to attack Ambarish Maharaj and his wife. Ambarish Maharaj is a devotee of Vishnu. Vishnu sends his Sudarshan Chakra, his weapon of choice. And the demon is cut to pieces by the Sudarshan Chakra of Vishnu. And then the Sudarshan goes after Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni sees Sudarshan coming after him, and he takes off. Durvasa Muni runs to Lord Brahma, says, "My dear Lord Brahma, Sudarshan is trying to kill me. It's burning. It's because Sudarshan is also fire. It's burning. Please save me from Sudarshan." And Lord Brahma said, "This is the weapon of Vishnu. How can I possibly save you from Sudarshan? I can't help you. I come from Vishnu. Vishnu is my superior in every way. I can't help you." Durvasa Muni runs to Lord Shiva, to Kailas. And my dear Lord Shiva, Sudarshan is chasing me. Please do something, help me. Lord Shiva said, "This is a weapon of Vishnu. There's no possible. I can't help you from the weapon of Vishnu. Go to Vishnu. I can't help you." So Durvasa Muni runs to Vishnu. "My dear Lord Vishnu, I'm so sorry. Please save me from Sudarshan." Vishnu says, "This is not about me." He says, "My Vaishnavas are more important than I am. I am under the control of my Vaishnavas because of the love they have for me. I can't help you." Durvasa Muni finally gets it through his thick skull, and he goes back to Ambarish Maharaj and Ambarish Maharaj's wife. All the while, the Sudarshan is chasing him. He runs, he falls at the feet of Ambarish Maharaj and his wife and begs for forgiveness. Ambarish forgives. So I'm just going to read the questions in the chat because then they may be able to address them as we go forward. I'll read it out loud, I'm sorry. How did gambling fit in with Dharma? Is one question. Another question is, also, doesn't allowing the narcissist to do what they want confirm that what the narcissist is doing is okay? Doesn't it make them a worse narcissist? Very good question. Another one is, my uncle is a narcissist, but he's also deeply into yoga and spirituality. He claims to be self-aware, but he refuses to listen to me when I call him out for his narcissistic behavior. Excellent, excellent questions. All tie into exactly what's going on here. The story of Durvasa Muni. Durvasa was a Muni, a Rishi. He's considered a Brahmarshi. And we see the narcissistic tendency coming out of Durvasa Muni. Very, very good. And the other question about Dharma, how does gambling fit in with Dharma? It doesn't. It doesn't. Not in the sense that it doesn't, but that's really beside the point. It's not beside the point, but that's not where I'm going with this. So yes, why was Yudhishthira Maharaj engaging in gambling in the first place? Another question. But what we're going to get into is how to deal with the narcissist and Duryodhana, not discounting the gambling issue, but we'll come to that. These two stories, the part about Duryodhana, the narcissist, and how he destroyed his entire family with his narcissism, how no one was able to stand up to Duryodhana, and Yudhishthira's attempt to deal with Duryodhana using the principles of Dharma also did not stop Duryodhana. So the point that we have to understand is that the principles of Dharma do not work with a narcissist. Very, very important. In fact, and we see this, read the Mahabharata. In the entire Mahabharata, everyone is dealing with Duryodhana, the world's greatest narcissist, using and arguing the principles of Dharma. It doesn't work. He did not stop. He was not even persuaded from stopping. Quite the contrary, Duryodhana used the principles of Dharma to justify what he was doing. He used the principles of Dharma to manipulate Dharmatma, to manipulate Yudhishthira. He used the principles of Dharma to make Yudhishthira feel guilty. The principles of Dharma do not work with a narcissist. The principles of Dharma do not counteract the behavior of a narcissist. Extremely important that we understand this. This is why one of the questions in the chat, doesn't allowing the narcissist to do what they want confirm what the narcissist is doing? Yes. Yes is the answer to that question. Yudhishthir, adhering to the principles of Dharma, Tapa, Socha, Daya, Satyam, are the four basic foundational principles of Dharma. They're called Siddharana Dharma. These are foundational. Tapa, self-control, self-discipline, self-mastery. Tapa, Socha, purity of motive, always trying to do what's best for yourself and others. Tapa, Socha, Daya, compassion. Tapa, Socha, Daya, Satyam, always being truthful. So these are the four basic principles of Dharma called Siddharana Dharma. A person who is struggling, because it's not easy, I won't say struggling, but who is endeavoring is a better word, to live their life according to the principles of Dharma, trying to be truthful, trying to have purified motivations, to not act out of revenge and things like this. A person who is trying to always be compassionate. A narcissist loves the Dharmatma. The narcissist absolutely loves people who follow the principles of Dharma. Narcissists eat Dharmatmas for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. I really want that to sink in. We think and we are taught that the principles of Dharma are all in all. And I'm going to put this out there. Can someone put in the chat, go online and go to Google and Google the percentage of narcissists maybe in society? It's not a large number. I certainly hope it's not a large number. And the reason why I'm curious about this, I think it's be interesting for our conversation, is because the principles of Dharma are absolutely essential for a civilized society. That is true. For the well-being and the progression of a civilized society, the principles of Dharma are essential. The principles of Dharma are what distinguish the human animal from the four-legged animal. That's the only thing that distinguishes the two. So yes, the principles of Dharma are essential for a civilized society. However, narcissists eat Dharmatmas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then have them for dessert. And we see this in the story of the Mahabharata. The entire story of the Mahabharata is a narcissist and being confronted with a Dharmatma. Now, it is important to say that when given enough rope, the narcissists will inevitably destroy themselves. The only problem is they destroy everyone else along the way. There was no question from the beginning of Mahabharata, when you're reading the Mahabharata, you're listening to the stories of the Mahabharata, there is no question that Duryodhana was not going to succeed. What he was doing was narcissist in the end analysis, it was not going, you cannot win ultimately in life, in relationships, in the long term, being a narcissist. But you can destroy a whole lot of people along the way, and you will end up, if not transforming yourself, destroying yourself. Narcissism inevitably causes destruction, and inevitably leads to destruction. We have another comment. I don't agree that the principles of Dharma don't work on narcissists. If so, the principles of Dharma are wrong and need to be redefined and reinterpreted. Yes and no. I'll come back to this. this particular person is actually jumping ahead of the presentation because I'm coming back to this. And anyways, we're going to address this very important point, which this person brings up in the comment section. So, however, in the other story, Durvasa Muni, a rishi, also is susceptible and exhibited narcissistic behavior. But how was Durvasa Muni dealt with? Ambarish Maharaj was also Dharmatma, very righteous, always followed the principles of Dharma. Look up and read the story of Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj, and you see the perfect example. Actually, there are many others. I was considering which story to use. But one of the most perfect examples in the Puranas of how to deal with a narcissist. Durvasa Muni, also a Dharmatma. The difference between Durvasa Muni, Ambarish Maharaj, a Dharmatma. The difference between Ambarish Maharaj dealing with narcissism and Yudhishthir dealing with narcissism is Ambarish was operating on a slightly higher level. And this higher level is talked about in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna coins a phrase that was never used before and was never used since. It may have been used since, but only in the context of the Gita. But Krishna coins a phrase in the Bhagavad Gita. We have the principles of Dharma, but the principles of Dharma are very, very basic, very basic. Basic, bare essentials for a civilized society to progress. But it's not enough, because we know the narcissists of society eat the principles of Dharma for lunch. So the principles of Dharma alone are not enough. This is why in the Bhagavad Gita, now we're going into the Bhagavad Gita and what the Bhagavad Gita is essentially about. Arjuna, if you know the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna this is part of the Mahabharata actually. It was the war after all of the story of, the Duryodhan and the gambling. It's now come to a place where Duryodhan has brought the entire world to the brink of war against the Pandavas, and he's got his people on his side. Just before the war begins, Arjuna succumbs, and I use this word deliberately. Arjuna succumbs to Dharma. Arjuna, in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says, Krishna, we shouldn't be doing this. Why should I recognize the principles of Dharma, engage in this war that is in every way contrary to the principles of Dharma? And Arjuna, read the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna gives all the reasons Arjuna gives for not going to war are based on the principles of Dharma. He talks about what war does to society. He talks about what war will do to himself in terms of killing his guru, his grandfather, his cousins, because all his family members are on the opposite side, and his brothers are on his side. So Arjuna is saying, if I go ahead with this war, I am in effect sanctioning and even literally killing my own family members. That is sin of the highest order. Everyone on the battlefield are the leaders of society. If we kill all the leaders of society, who's going to protect the innocent, elderly, women, and children from rogues and thieves? We are the protectors of society. If we engage in this battle, we kill all of ourselves, who's going to protect the kingdom? Who's going to protect society? Who is going to ensure society follows the principles of Dharma? Another thing, leading up to the battle, This is how Yudhishthira was so insistent, not insistent, he was walking the path of Dharma. So it's admirable in that regard. But he sent Krishna as a peace envoy, as a UN ambassador, as a peace envoy to Duryodhana, to try to sue for peace rather than go to war. So Krishna says, very well, he goes to the court of Duryodhana. This is my Duryodhana. Everything, all the terms of the gambling match were honored. It's time for you to return the kingdom. It's the Pandavas rightfully, it's their kingdom. It was given to them by their father. Everything was done. All the I's were dotted. All the T's were crossed. Give them back to the kingdom and enough. Duryodhana says, absolutely not. Krishna says, very well, Yudhishthira instructs me to tell you, why don't you simply give them 5 villages, 1 village for each of the brothers. Give them 5 villages. Keep the kingdom. Just give them 5 villages for them to. This is dealing with the narcissist using the principles of Dharma, right? The principles of Dharma, compassion, nonviolence, these are the principles of Dharma. Avoid war at all costs, absolute principles of Dharma. Give me 5 villages. What does Duryodhana do? What is his response? No. Narcissists eat dharmatmas for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. Dharma is not the tool to use against the narcissist. Let me carry on. So at the Battle of Kurukshetra, Duryodhana dispensed. Duryodhana said, I would not give enough land to the Pandavas, to Yudhishthira, in which to drive the head of a pin. Now, if that's not narcissism, what is? Come to war, Arjuna says, he sees everyone there, and he gives all these arguments based on the principles of Dharma, of why he should not go to war. Krishna, based on the principles of Dharma, within the very first chapter, the second chapter, he completely refutes, based on the principles of Dharma, all of Arjuna's arguments. But that wasn't the issue. That's the second chapter. The second chapter refutes everything. The second and the beginning of the third chapter refutes all of Arjuna's arguments based on Dharma about not going to war. That's not the issue. Later on in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes another level of existence. And he tells Arjuna, it's not about whether or not you go to war. Very important, absolutely. Krishna was not advocating war. It's not about, he was telling Arjuna, it's not about whether or not you're going to war. It's what is your motivation? Where are you coming from? What is your worldview? What is your worldview? The Sanskrit term is shraddha, often translated in English as faith. Terrible faith in a manner, but shraddha means worldview. What is your belief structure? That has to be determined first. If you clear that up, then make the decision whether or not you should go to war. First, investigate, know, and purify your belief system. Then make the decision. And Krishna identifies, they're the principles of Dharma, the basic principles, but then Krishna identifies another level of existence. And that Krishna calls, the phrase that I described he coined, was Dharmamrita. Dharma, but Dharmamrita. Amrita means nectar, or the essence of Dharma. So Dharma, the principles of Dharma are baseline, basic principles for the functioning of society. But if 10, 20% of society are narcissists, this 10, 20% of society are going to consume the other 80% with their narcissism. So there also has to be a higher level above Dharma to counteract narcissism. And we see this in the story of Ambarish Maharaj. And I'll identify it more clearly in just a moment. But there's one more quick story to describe how this dynamic between narcissism and how to deal with narcissists. Krishna, when he was a young boy, had an aunt. And this aunt gave birth to a child, and this child was deformed, let's just put it that way. And the parents had extra limbs and so on and so forth. And the parents were beside themselves with the deformity of the child. So the various priests, the parents called in these various priests and these seers to ask what to do, what's going on. And one very powerful sage who had some ability to see and to understand these things, he said, well, what you should do is take this child, your son, and put them on the lap of various individuals. If you do this, there's an individual in the world, somewhere out there, that if your son is placed in their lap, all the deformities will correct themselves, and the child will be strong and healthy, even more so than a normal child. However, that person is also going to be the cause of your son's death. So you can choose to not find out or to alleviate the deformities of your child and have the child live like this, or you can find out and alleviate the deformities, but unfortunately that person is going to be the cause of your child's death. So the parents wanted to know, they wanted to alleviate the deformities, so they went. So what they would do is they would invite all kinds of people from all over the world to visit their home, their palace, and they would ask the person to hold their child. So Krishna was visiting his aunt one day, and the little baby was there, and Krishna was 5-6 years old or something. And the baby started crying. So Krishna picked up the baby and put the baby in his laps, and the deformities disappeared. The mother saw this, one of Krishna's aunts, the father. Everyone was shocked because it had not, Krishna is a family member. Krishna is an aunt, a cousin. So the mother said to Krishna, my dear Krishna, Krishna's a child. He had no idea. It's Krishna, but anyways, the story goes. So the aunt said, please, whatever you do, don't kill my son. Krishna says, of course I won't. You're my aunt. I will never. He says, and the mother was continuing to beg, please. She was distraught. And Krishna says, whatever he does, even if he insults you, even if he insults me, and the mother, even if he insults you 100 times, even if he insults me 100 times or offends me, I won't. Not a problem. This baby was an individual. His name was Shishupal. Shishupal did not know this story about his birth, but he naturally developed an enmity towards Krishna. I'm going to abbreviate this story because we've been going at it for nearly an hour now, and I want to get to the conclusion and to address some of the questions in the chat. Shishupal developed a natural enmity towards Krishna over years, decades. So Krishna was at an event with the Pandavas, and the Pandavas, who are Vaishnavas, they were worshiping Krishna, and everyone at the event, they were worshiping and honoring Krishna. Shishupal was there, and he had this enmity with Krishna. He couldn't handle it, and he stood up and he started insulting and going at Krishna. He was calling Krishna names, and he was just really going after Krishna in public in front of everybody. And this is not the first time Shishupal had done this. Remember, this is decades of Shishupal abusing Krishna and Krishna's dynasty, the Yadu dynasty. And there were many people at the event who wanted to get up and just, give Shishupal what for. Bhima, once again, Bhima is being Bhima, right? He jumped up, got up, picked up his club and was about to go after Shishupal. They had to calm him down. And not they, Krishna. Krishna said, it's okay. Let him speak. Shishupal was going on and on and on and on and on. Finally, Krishna interjected. He says, Shishupal. And Krishna told the story of his birth. See, Krishna said to Shishupal, you have insulted me in 97 different ways. You have only 3 left. And then Shishupal uttered 3 very disgusting and powerful insults to Krishna. And Krishna hurled his Sudarshan Chakra, and I have to give the Disney version because YouTube tends to. What do they say? Krishna unalived Shishupal with his Sudarshan Chakra. Oh, something in the chat. Is that level above Dharma apply only when we deal with narcissists, or can it be generalized for highly evolved people? I remember a story of Prabhupada tasting the deity's prasad before offering. Yes, once again, this particular person is jumping ahead of the presentation. Correct. But yes, and it's actually a good reminder to start to wrap this up. So this higher level, if you will. So there's Dharma, and then there's Dharmamrita. The essence of Dharma, the essential qualities of Dharma is Dharmamrita. It is Dharmamrita that counteracts narcissism. And guess what Dharmamrita is? Bhakti. It's Bhakti. Krishna defines Bhakti as the essence of Dharma. When you take Dharma at its essential nature, its highest expression, it's Dharmamrita, it's Bhakti. And we see in the stories of Krishna and Shishupal, Ambarish and Durvasa Muni, these individuals, they do not deal with the situation using Dharma. It doesn't work. They're operating at a higher level. What they do is they stand up for what is right at that particular time. Ambarish Maharaj did not apologize for drinking water. He didn't. Very, very important. Ambarish Maharaj did not apologize for drinking the water. He did not say, yes, what I did was wrong, because it wasn't. He did not say, I'm sorry, because there was no need for him to be sorry. Durvasa Muni was out of line. When Krishna dealt with Shishupal, Krishna honored the promise he gave to Shishupal's mother to accept 100 abuses from this knucklehead, after which he would be given warning after warning after warning. At that point, enough. But what is also very, very important is that on the level of Bhakti, on the level of Dharmamrita, in dealing with the narcissist on that level, there is an opportunity for the narcissist to be transformed. That's the difference. Durvasa Muni, because, and this is the benefit of him being a Muni. Duryodhana was not a Muni. There was no question. This is why the very title of today's presentation is how to counteract, yes, Dharmamrita, Bhakti counteracts narcissism. Dharmamrita or Bhakti nullifies narcissism. Yes. But in the title, the very title, I made it very, very specific, and intentionally I put, can potentially transform a narcissist. But that's on the narcissist. That's on the narcissist. It is not our responsibility to transform narcissists. We can counteract them. We can nullify them. But we can't transform them. They have to transform themselves. Now, what Dharma does, Dharma is completely consumed by narcissism. Narcissists eat Dharmatmas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you get nothing else from today, get that. And the reason why that is so important is because we put Dharma on a pedestal. And it should be. Dharma needs to be on a pedestal. Without Dharma, there is no civilized society. So Dharma is absolutely essential for a civilized society. But for the 20 to 15 or whatever percentage of people who are narcissists in the world, they will eat and destroy all of society with their narcissism alone, despite the world being governed by Dharma. So to counteract narcissism, to nullify narcissism, we need Dharmamrita, we need Bhakti. Read that story of Ambarish Maharaj. He did not apologize for what he did because he wasn't wrong. That was a principles for which now he was going to accept responsibility for his choice. Durvasa Muni created a demon. So Ambarish Maharaj was willing to accept responsibility for his choice, but he was not going to back down. It's a difference. And in doing so, from the place of Dharmamrita, from the place of Bhakti, there is always the opportunity for the narcissist to be transformed. And because Durvasa Muni was a Muni, because he was of a higher level of consciousness than Duryodhana, he took the opportunity to be transformed. And he threw himself at the feet of Ambarish. Duryodhana would never touch the feet of Yudhishthira. Never. That was never going to happen. In fact, he would rather burn the entire dynasty to the ground, which he did, than touch the feet of Yudhishthira Maharaj. That's a narcissist. Narcissists and dharmatmas, there's no contest. There is no contest. It is dharmamrita. It is bhakti that does it. And now we have to understand, and we are well over time, but I'll try to wrap it up briefly here. Dharmamrita, bhakti, is the inherent nature of the living entity. We are naturally capable of manifesting and being in bhakti. The problem is ahankar, ego. That's what, if we purify ego, what naturally, inevitably, fully, and powerfully shines forth is bhakti. By nature, it is part of the essential nature of the spirit soul, of who we are. The problem is ego, ahankar, gets in the way, and we operate rather from our spiritual being of bhakti, we operate from ego. And when we operate from ego, we fall right into the trap of a narcissist. So the process of bhakti is purifying ego. In one of the, I believe when I was sharing this topic yesterday, I put in the title Adhyatmika Bhakti, which is a term which indicates adhyatma means of the self. Bhakti is bhakti. And it can be loosely, with literary license, indicate self-love, this term Adhyatmika Bhakti. This is when bhakti becomes manifest on the level of ourself. Like Ambarish Maharaj stood his ground. He stood his ground, but he did so in a manner that gave Ambarish the opportunity to be transformed. Krishna stood his ground, but in a manner which gave Shishupal the opportunity to transform himself. But they stood their ground. I don't like the term stood their ground because in this current climate it has political connotations, and that's not what I mean. What I mean is they're operating on a higher level of consciousness. They're not operating based on their own ego. They're recognizing they're dealing with a narcissist, but they're also recognizing that they have to operate from a place of bhakti, a place that is devoid of ego. That is bhakti, a place that is devoid of their own ego. So going back to the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said, it's not about whether you go to war or not. The question is, are you operating from your ego? The entire Bhagavad Gita from chapter 3 onwards is about Arjuna, get out of your ego, then decide whether or not you're going to go to war. Because if you're in your ego, if you're operating from a ahankar, whether you decide to go to war or not, the answer is going to be devastation in all kinds of ways, spiritually, in more ways you can imagine if you're operating from ego. But if your ego is purified, then you make the decision. No matter what decision you make, at least you're operating from a place that is devoid of false ego. You're operating from a place that allows for transformation. The entire Bhagavad Gita, from chapter 3, I would say halfway from chapter 2, all the way to chapter 18, is about Krishna getting Arjuna and telling Arjuna, training Arjuna in how to operate, how to purify ego. Because at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, after the entire discussion of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's ego is purified. Krishna says, now do what you want to do. The last instruction of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita was to Arjuna, now you decide. Because by the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is pure enough, like Durvasa Muni. Arjuna is a great saintly person in his own way. So at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said, aha, now you choose what you want to do. And Krishna stopped. That's the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Get out of our ego. Rise to Dharmamrita, not Dharma. You're not going to get anywhere. Rise to Dharmamrita, then choose. I'll read a few of the comments. Is that level above Dharma apply only when we deal with narcissists, or can it be generalized for highly evolved people? I remember a story of Prabhupada tasting the deity's prasadam before offering. Yes, Bhakti. So yes, the Dharmamrita it's who we are. Just clear our ego out of the way, and we operate in the world from a place of Dharmamrita. We're operating on a higher level. So everything in our worldview, our belief system, informs how we deal with the world around us. So whether a person is a narcissism or not, we are going to create opportunities for everyone to be uplifted. So yes, we are all, that's what the Bhagavad Gita is about, trying to lift Arjuna to Dharmamrita, to try to lift society to Dharmamrita, because on a level of Dharma, one narcissist can wipe out society. One narcissist can wipe out a society of Dharmatmas. We see what Duryodhana did to Yudhishthir. There is no contest between a narcissist and a Dharmatma. No contest. A Dharmatmika, on the other hand, completely counteracts and nullifies, is far more powerful than a narcissist, and it provides the narcissist the opportunity to be transformed. Whether the narcissist is transformed or not is another issue. That's up to the narcissist. But the opportunity is provided by a person who is on the level of Dharmatma, not reacting from ego. Then there is opportunity for upliftment and transformation. I will end there, and I will see you next Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. If someone, maybe not now, another time, put in the chat the percentage of narcissists in the world. I'm actually quite curious. I'll look it up as well hereafter. But that'd be an interesting bit of information for all of us to keep in mind when understanding narcissism and society, the world. So, quick thing. The person who brought this up, the question she had asked was, can we be happy in relationship with a narcissist? The very brief answer to that question is, because we're now over an hour, the answer is, and I wrote to her, I said, yes, but. And the but became the inspiration for today's presentation. This was 2 days ago. The but is, yes, a dharmatmik, a person on the level of dharmamrita, the bhakti yogi, has no problem with a narcissist. Durvasa Muni had no problem, sorry, not Durvasa Muni, I keep getting names mixed up. Ambarish Maharaj had no problem with Durvasa Muni. Ambarish Maharaj was fine. He was absolutely fine. So a dharmamrita, a person who is in the level of dharmamrita, who is a bhakti yogi, can live in happiness and satisfaction with a narcissist easily. Narcissists hate bhakti yogis because bhakti yogis, they're on a completely different level. Narcissists cannot exist in relationship with a bhakti yogi. So the narcissist must transform themselves or they have to leave. The bhakti yogi is fine. It's the narcissist that cannot live in a happy relationship with a bhakti yogi. Because the bhakti yogi is not reacting and living in ego. And the bhakti yogi is always providing opportunities for transformation, which the narcissist, if the narcissist is Duryodhan, the narcissist is not going to transform, and they go somewhere else and they victimize some dharmatma somewhere. Or if the narcissist is Vasamuni and is spiritually inclined, they can be transformed. They will touch the feet of the bhakti yogi and live in harmony with the bhakti yogi. Om Sahana Vavatu. Oh, 1 to 6% of the population, a commenter says. Okay, 1 to 6% of the population are narcissists. That's the US population. Another commenter says, but I don't think that percentage is correct. That only reflects the people who are being treated by a therapist. Good point as well. Yeah, so but whether it's 20%, it's a very small percent. 1 to 6% is a small percent. I thought it was up to 15 to 20%, which lets you know the amount of people I deal with. I'm sorry, I take that back. What I mean to say, whether it's 20% or 1%, all it takes is one. Duryodhan was one individual, and he very near destroyed the entire dynasty, the Kaurava dynasty. I mean, it takes one. It takes one. The problem with it, this is why Bhima wanted to burn the hands of his brother Yudhishthir. Duryodhan, yes, Duryodhan's a narcissist. But a dharmatma is not going to counter a narcissist. And it takes only one to wreak total havoc. So it behooves us to come to the level of dharmamrita, bhakti, purified ego. Our bhakti is a natural manifestation that shines through a purified ego. Narcissists are completely stumped. They get nowhere. They're counteract, they're nullified. And they either shrink away and go try to victimize someone else, or they are transformed. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Kuruvavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. See you next Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hari Hari. Perhaps a better calculation is to find a percentage of the population that are in possession of power. Okay. Good point. Have a wonderful weekend. Hari Hari.